Hello, Ms. Lenny. My name is Mark, and welcome to our Bissa project presentation. With me are my teammates Jekyll, Marzuki, Donovan, Rhonda, and Julie. But first, I would just like to go see what Savvify is. Savvify is an application, it's an e-payments platform that allows users to make payments to vendors. Every payment will be rounded up, and this amount will go to the user's savings fund. Savvify is a company, it's a small team of 6 people, and lacks information security and networking expertise. Our equipment includes 6 work computers, server equipment, networking switches, and data drives to archive data. Next, we'll be looking at the use case diagram. On the left, you can see our user as well as a list of what features he can do within our application. The most important one will be to make payments to vendors. When making payments to vendors, the transaction will first be rounded up before being sent to a bank to process the full transaction. Once processed, that transaction will be sent to a third-party vendor, and then they will receive their payments from the user. Next, we'll be looking at the interaction between our system, network, and database. So from the left, our user will be able to send data through our application through a firewall to reach the web server. Once at the web server, the data can go where it needs to, be it vendors, banks, or the database. Conversely, it can also go from the database, vendor, or bank back to our web server through the firewall and back to our user. We will also have 2 administrators that can configure components of our system, like the database and web server, through browser clients to ensure that our system is as protected as possible. Next, we'll be going on to Internet and mobile security. Internet security refers to protecting the network our system operates on, to prevent unauthorized access to our network, and to protect the information within. Mobile security refers to ensuring our mobile application code is strong and secure, and has as little loopholes as possible that can be exploited. So for mobile security, there are security testing tools, which test the code for any vulnerabilities. They can be done through static testing or dynamic testing. Static testing refers to scanning the source code as itself, while dynamic testing refers to scanning the code while it is deployed within an environment. Now, Jekyll will be talking about internet security.
Thank you, Mark. Today I'll be talking about our information and mobile security as well as the recommendation and justification. We have chosen 3 information security to focus on: firewalls, intrusion and detections, and scanning analysis. Firewalls filter the incoming and outgoing data so that unauthorized data will not be leaked into our system. Intrusion detection consists of procedures to detect any system intrusion by monitoring the network traffic to detect malicious behavior. And scanning analysis is to collect information beforehand that an attacker will need to launch a successful attack. The advantage of firewall is to be able to filter harmful packets from the useful ones. The disadvantage would be that if there are too many packets, it would take a very long time to do so. Next, the advantage of intrusion detection would be to uncover any exploitation attacks and perform protocol analysis. However, the disadvantage would be that it only detects the attack but will not be able to prevent it. You will also need an expert present to be able to know what to do with the information. Next, the advantage of vulnerability scanners would be that it can identify any vulnerabilities in the system before the cyber criminals can. It is also easily repeatable and can save money in the long run as it prevents the loss of customers. The disadvantage would be that you might not be able to find all the vulnerabilities in the system due to the advancement of technology. As for our recommendation, firewalls would be SonicWall TZ400 and McAfee Total Protection. Intrusion and detection would be the McAfee Network Security Platform. Vulnerability scanner would be the Managed Engine Firewall Analyzer, NetSparker Security, and Nmap. Security testing, we will have chosen Q1. Lastly, our justification. We have chosen these firewalls is because the SonicWall provides a perimeter security and is very easy to maintain. The McAfee will provide an additional layer of defense, even though Norton is stronger than McAfee Total Protection. McAfee can support up to 10 devices, which allows our company to use. McAfee also allows technical support, whereas other software does not because they are free. For intrusion and detection prevention, because it can only detect attack and not prevent it, the McAfee NSP provides both a detection and a prevention software. We chose NetSparker for our vulnerability scanner because it has proof-based scanning system. It will scan the actual vulnerabilities, as some detection may be exploitable. It is also more ideal for mobile application and it has more optimal for security. Next, as for security testing, we have chosen Q1 because Z attack will need us to operate the system manually and we will not have enough to do that. So, as for ImmuniWeb, it is too expensive for our new startup business. We have not enough resources to maintain it. Now I'll pass the time to Marzuki to talk about application security development.
Thank you, Jekyll. I'll be talking about application security development. It is one of the core aspects of cybersecurity. However, many developers are not giving attention it deserves. We are an e-payment service platform, so Savvify goes beyond the guidelines of securing coding practices. What is SQL injection? Attackers can use to make our web application process and execute injection SQL statements as part of existing SQL query. Dolby tree injection and batch SQL in statement injection can be used by hackers to destroy our database. Job statements will be executed and Savvify will lose all of our particulars. As a recommendation, Savvify will be using parameterized statement as the first layer of protection. Object Relation Mapping (ORM) framework is used to make translation of SQL results into codes objects more seamless. Other than that, we will also be using external software to sanitize the data inputs. Sanitizing data inputs is a good practice to ensure that there are no loopholes in our codes. We will be using BlickBridge. Password hashing and encryption. What is password encryption? Encryption is a two-way function where users can scramble information and only a user with a key is able to view it. Cipher helps to encrypt and decrypt information. Now, what is hashing? Hashing is an algorithm that calculates a file based on the blocks of data, transforming from a far shorter fixed length, which represents the original string. As a recommendation, we'll protect all our credentials using encryption and hashing using the SHA-2. Password-based encryption, password-based key derivation tool, and sort string. And also an additional layer of source file protection, a JavaScript obfuscator tool to write code so that it is harder for users to read and understand. The recommendation, why we choose the two of them? It is a prevention, is to prevent reversing of password encryption, but it's still vulnerable to guessing attacks. It is also a hashing algorithm that designed to protect passwords, meant to be slow, making it harder to crack. Now, what is intellectual property theft? We have to protect our JavaScript codes from that. Intellectual property theft involves robbing people from companies of their idea and innovation. Protecting JavaScript codes involve protecting source files that can be used to compress our JavaScript projects. One of it is called minification. Minification removes unnecessary or redundant data without affecting how the source files are processed by the application. This is an example of how we can do that by using minify.org. Here's a recommendation. The advantages of it is that there is a lower file size. Save file size of source code can be reduced, allowing faster data transfer, resulting in better loading times. Most minification tools are readily available online, and most of it are free, therefore saving operational costs. However, it reduces readability as developers will have a hard time debugging the code. Impossible for third-party developers to see what source code they should do. Now, I'll be passing the time to Donovan to continue with the application security development. Don, please.
Thank you, Marzuki, and I'll be presenting the second portion of application security development. The next security measure is to prevent source code vulnerabilities. So what does code vulnerability mean? It means that there's a weakness in the code that poses a viable risk of undermining protection in the code. This exploit helps hackers to take advantage of our code by adding endpoints to retrieve information, copy, reuse, or erase everything. The JavaScript obfuscator can transform the original source code to a new representation that is harder to read by humans, however, it's still functional. Another measure is to reduce the number of dependencies such as open source libraries and public packages. To automate this process by checking our codes, we can use tools such as string encrypt. This is an extension of Visual Studio Code that we're using to code our application. It is similar to the JavaScript obfuscator that we mentioned previously. Code grip can be also used to analyze and scan codes for any vulnerabilities. It can be prompt suggested solutions to solve the issues. We recommend using both string encrypt extension together with code grip in order to minimize the vulnerabilities that can happen. Next, input validation helps Savvify to validate inputs that are being keyed into the application. There are two types of validation, whitelist validation and blacklist validation. Whitelist validation only accepts the correct input, while blacklist validation rejects any wrong input by the user. Both can use the regular expressions also known as regex, to filter through different sequence of strings inputs. One example will be using a Loon's algorithm that can help check through a credit card or debit card number to ensure that it's valid. Our recommendations for Savvify is to use both in conjunction to ensure maximum validation possible. This is enforced by the output encoding to also ensure that whatever is keyed into the database is valid. Lastly, session hijacking can happen to any application. Therefore, implementing preventive measures, we are able to reduce the number of hijacks if it happens. There are many ways of being session hijacked. One way can be cross-site scripting, also known as XSS. There are three ways that cross-site scripting can happen: reflected XSS, stored XSS, and DOM XSS. Another way of session hijacking is session hijacking. It is where a hacker uses a packet sniffer to monitor end-user traffic and intercept the cookies after being authenticated by the user. There are a few ways where you can try to prevent session hijacking. We can use HTTPS to ensure SSL and TLS encryption for all session traffic, and setting HTTP only attribute using the setCookie HTTP header to prevent access to cookies from client-side script. Savvify can also regenerate the session keys after initial authentication and also perform additional user identification verification beyond the session key. Now I'll be passing the time to Rhonda to talk about information security policy.
Thank you, Donovan. I'll be talking about information security policies. We have chosen 5 to secure our customers' data, and this is why. Firstly, data breach response policy. Storing customers' personal information as Savvify stores personal information such as name, password, credit card information. This policy helps to protect customers and companies' data in case of any data breach. Next, human error. These can come from the daily task at work, providing customers information by word of mouth, email sensitive information without encrypting, and using weak passwords on their work accounts. Next is employee internet use monitoring and filtering policy. It's to reduce malware attacks and to minimize by monitoring and filtering the internet use in our company. By filtering websites, monitor employees' web usage, blacklisting, whitelisting websites. Filtering websites is by sorting them into categories and content such as social media, unauthorized, and potential malware sites. Next, monitoring employees' web usage. By acknowledging this policy allows the management to review employees' web usage by ensuring that suspicious emails being sent to our employees. Next, by filtering these sites, we'll also be able to understand the restricted sites that will be categorized as blacklisting and the approved sites categorized as whitelisting. Moving on to mobile device encryption policy, theft is the stolen possession of user's mobile device or lost by the user finding its way into hands of malicious attacks. Mobile operating access permissions is that potential attacks where users can grant permission to disclose personal information that can be compromised by potential attackers. Next, threats. Trespassers may gain control to bypass controls, protecting users' sensitive data, which is dangerous as we withhold a lot of customers' personal and important information. Moving on to password construction policy, we should set complexity requirements that should be alphanumeric and should not be based on any personal information. Next will be password generators, randomly generated password to create one-of-a-kind passwords which are stronger and harder to guess. Lastly, password protection policies is to change passwords at least every 90 days. That should be done periodically. Next, we should educate users on the best password practices, as passwords should not be shared with anyone, including family or friends. Passwords should also not be written down. Lastly, two-factor authentication. For Savvify, we'll be sending a code via text message. Now I'll be passing the time to Julie, who will be talking about the recommendations for information security policy. Julie, please.
Thank you, Rhonda. I am Julie, and based from the policies that we have chose, these are the recommendations that we have for our information security policy. The first one will be conducting a monthly meeting to review the policies to ensure that it is not out of date and information in our company would change from time to time. By tailoring to our company needs, we'll build a better security system and policy for Savvify. Second, creating an internet use approval template for employees to fill up the information would shorten the time of management approval as they would know the purpose and categories of the site by viewing the template that it is filled. Thirdly, creating delegation of permission access would eliminate the needs to share our passwords. This would prevent data breaching and unauthorized access. Fourthly, we can use token for authentication to prove their identity before accessing to our application and systems. This creates a better security system for Savvify. Fifth will be having a passphrase in our password just by containing symbols, numbers, sentences, and punctuation to create longer and complex password to prevent hackers from cracking our password. Lastly, we can get password management tools to assist in generating and retrieving complex passwords by storing them in the encrypted databases. Providing a password strength testers to determine whether password is good enough to pass the guidelines listed in the policies. In conclusion, accommodations of many aspects is required to ensure proper security against threats to our system. Internet and mobile security helps to protect and test our system against attackers. Application development security ensures that no vulnerabilities can be used to exploit our mobile application, and information security policies are in place to protect any user data that comes into our possession. We hope our recommendations will be useful for any security considerations that might happen in the future. This is our infographics for our education materials, and this is Savvify presentation. Thank you for your time.